Planning Commission meeting to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Christine is going to do roll call for us tonight, and we'll go from there.
Edward Keller.
Excuse me, absent.
Wendy Simon.
Here.
Christine Holcomb here. Harold Bain.
Excused and absent.
Mark Borchardt.
Here.
Tom Quazell.
Here.
Robert Muesling.
Here.
Keith Bell.
Here.
And Kathy Schweikart.
Here. Thank you. Item number 4 on our agenda is amendments to agenda. I do have one amendment, and I believe it should go under item number 7, like 7A for unfinished business. It's regarding the proposed zoning map changes that we discussed at our last meeting. And if we can make that amendment, when we get to that part, Rod will update us on what we have to take care of, okay? So.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Item number 6 is new business. There's 3 items under item number 6. Two of the items are public hearings. One is regarding supplemental setback provisions, and the other one is regarding recreational animals. Before we start with the public hearings, there are rules on the back of our agenda for public hearings / public comment rules. And I'm going to read the 6 rules that we have, okay? And then I'll open the public hearing. I'm sorry. Right, I skipped approval of minutes. Let me back up a second, hold on. Item number 5 is approval of minutes. I do have one correction that was caught in our packet on the first page where it says approval of minutes. We have the date of January 20th, 2018. It should have been January 10th, 2018. In the official document that gets signed tonight, that correction has been made.
I did have another correction that I would request. Under unfinished business, the first paragraph where it says Chair Schweikart reeled the public hearing, all read, should be read.
There you go. Any other comments for the approval of minutes? Hearing none.
Madam Chair, make a motion to approve the minutes with the requested
Second.
corrections.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. Approval of minutes. Thank you for catching that. I'm sorry. Now we'll go to item number 6, which again is new business. 2 of the matters are public hearings, and 1 is just a discussion. Before we open the public meetings, I will read the public hearing, public comment rules. Number 1, all comments must be made through the chairperson. Comments directed to the applicant from the audience are prohibited. 2, individuals wishing to speak have time limits. 3 minutes for each member of the general public. 6 minutes for spokespersons of a larger group, for instance, subdivision association, condo association, business group, or similar groups. 3, anyone wishing to speak is asked to sign the sign-in sheet provided. However, anyone wishing to speak will be given the opportunity. 4, each individual will be allowed to speak once. It will be the chairperson's decision as to whether rebuttal comments will be allowed. 5, citizens may appoint a spokesperson to represent those who agree on a point of view. 6, public comments on a specific public hearing request should be made during the public hearing for that item. Okay. With that, our first public hearing we're going to address is section 3.11 supplemental setback provisions. I would open the public hearing at 7:06. Mr. Simons is going to be our timekeeper when you're getting towards under your 3 minutes or 6 minutes, depending on which way it goes. He'll give you like a little sign, so you know maybe to come to an end, wrap up your thought, okay? With that being said, Rod is our planner, and he's going to make a presentation, and we'll go from there, okay?
We need lights on.
Can somebody hit the lights in the back a little? Or can you see okay?
That's perfect.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. I put together a brief presentation because I thought it might be helpful to explain what this proposed amendment is including. So this is a proposed amendment that the Planning Commission has been discussing for a few months. Tonight's a public hearing. And there's a couple key components to this. It's primarily focused on what's section 3.11 of your ordinance, which is the supplementary setback provisions that apply to lots that front on a lake, river, or canal. And what I have up here now is your existing ordinance language. And I'm just going to read it. For lake, river, or canal lots, those residential lots and or parcels having one lot line abutting or extending into the water and an opposite lot line abutting a public thoroughfare shall maintain the required yard on the water side as an open and unobstructed yard, except that a covered or uncovered boat well shall be permitted. This is the existing ordinance. Now there's a second part to this as well. Once again, this is all existing. The setback shall be measured from the seawall or bulkhead, or if no seawall or bulkhead, from a normal high water mark of the shoreline. Boat wells cut into the bulkhead shall not have the effect of changing the waterfront property line. In the event that there are principal buildings located on adjacent lots which have an established setback that is less than the setback minimums that are listed above, which would be the minimums in the ordinance, then an alternative setback line may be established by averaging the setback of all principal structures located within 330 feet in both directions of the subject property. So that's your current ordinance, and that's how it reads. So the proposed amendment, the very first paragraph that I read, there's no change to that, where it talks about the lots that have double frontage and providing for that unobstructed yard. That's all existing language, that's not changing. The updated section is actually the second part here, where it says that the required minimum waterfront setback of a property shall be established by averaging the setback of principal structures located within 330 feet in both directions of the subject property. If there is a road that breaks the lot continuity or another zoning district that's different from the subject property within this 330-foot span, then only the lots between the subject site and the other zoning district or road shall be counted. So what this does, and I'll kind of try to provide for that comparison, but there's another provision here that's added on. Let me go over this too. As with the current ordinance, the setback shall be measured from the seawall, so I don't need to repeat that. Boat wells cut into the bulkhead shall not have the effect of changing the waterfront property line. That's the same. This is the new part. In the event that no other developments exist within 330 feet of both directions from the subject property, then the shoreline setback shall be a minimum of 40 feet in the R1 district, 55 in the R2, and 45 in the R3, and those are the existing setback requirements in those districts. So if we kind of look at the key change between the current ordinance and the proposed ordinance, I've really underlined the key parts here. So if you have principal buildings located on adjacent lots which have an established setback less than the setback minimums, then potentially you can do this lot averaging. That's the way the current ordinance reads. The way the proposed ordinance reads is it's no longer an option, and it doesn't matter if it's less or more. All lots essentially, if a new development is taking place, then you're going to base the setback on that averaging of the principal structures located within 330 feet in both directions of the subject property. And I have some graphics that will help to explain what that means. So under your current ordinance, this is an example in an R3 district. If you had this situation where you had existing lots along this waterfront, and the homes had been constructed at different points and with different setbacks, which is common, and then someone wanted to come in and put a new home right here. Well, this is 330 feet in each direction, but that wouldn't apply here because these homes, under your current ordinance, are all set back more than the minimum. This is the minimum right here. This is the minimum setback, so this is the actual buildable area. And these homes in this example are set back a lot farther than the buildable minimum. So if I had this property and it's zoned R3 and I want to build on it, the minimum setback for R3 is 45 feet, so I could put the home 45 feet under your current ordinance. So you can see in this case, because a lot of these are way back, this home could be a lot closer to the waterfront and could potentially obstruct the view. You know, it's going to look a little strange. It's going to be kind of in the front yard. So that was one of the concerns that that I know the Planning Commission had when they were looking at the ordinance. So under the proposal, what you do is you go out 330 feet in each direction. You look at all these different setbacks that would be in this example that we've shown, and then you average them. So you take the setbacks, there's 10 parcels, you divide it by 10, and then that's where that home has to go. Minimum setback. And so what you end up with is a setback that's a little more in line with the others because it's based on an average, and it's not sticking out in the front as much. So that was the intent of this ordinance regulation. Now, I know there's been some discussion about deed restrictions, because in some communities, and particularly maybe in your subdivision or in your condo association, you may have separate deed restrictions that impact what you can do on your property. Deed restrictions are basically a limit written on a deed to restrict, control, occupancy, or property use. It's a private restriction. It's typically placed on property that's part of a subdivision or condominium development. Deed restrictions are not part of the township zoning code and are not enforced by the township. It's a private restriction. The township is not typically a part to deed restrictions. So a change made to the township zoning ordinance does not change a deed restriction. So the zoning code in this particular case is those residential lots or parcels having one lot line abutting or extending into the water and an opposite lot line abutting a thoroughfare plan, public thoroughfare, shall maintain the required yard on the water side as an open and obstructed yard except for the covered or uncovered boat well. So let's look at what that really means. Yeah, here we go. What that really means is, here's our unobstructed required front yard. So going back to one of these examples, if this is the minimum front yard setback, required front yard setback, that's that area in green, that is your required front yard. That darker green you see there, that's your required front yard. So that has to remain under your current ordinance and under the proposed ordinance. This isn't changing. You have to be clear, above 3 feet, and then trees have to be pruned to an 8-foot high minimum. So you have to have that open area between 3 feet and 8 feet. That's your current ordinance, and that's also the proposed ordinance. There's no change in that. And then what comes into play, though, is the non-required front yard. And that is if somebody chooses to have their home set back farther than the minimum, this home could be built all the way up to here, but they've chosen to set it back farther. In that case, then you have what's called a non-required rear yard, and you can see the arrow that's pointing to what that is. The restrictions on plantings in your current ordinance and in the proposed ordinance do not apply to the non-required front yard. So in that area, you're allowed to have taller plantings. In this area, you are not. The required, you're limited. Here, you're not. That's the current ordinance and the proposed ordinance. There's no change. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So getting back to a recommendation. Before I do that, one other slide I want to show you. As with any zoning ordinance amendment, when we go through this process of setting a public hearing, getting public input, you typically go through a study process. You have a chance to look at it in more detail. And I know we've received some comments from staff as well. There's a couple challenges that come into play with the new ordinance language. One, There is a fairly significant setback variation in your waterfront areas. You don't have this perfect uniform setback. It's not all cookie cutter. It evolved over time, has a lot of character. So that can be a problem in terms of trying to enforce something that involves averaging. There's also practical challenges in measuring the setback from the waterfront. Because when you're measuring a setback, if you're a township official or if you're someone coming in new and you want to figure out that averaging, it's pretty easy to measure from the road because you have the easy rights to get on the roadway and you can use lasers to make those measurements, and it's pretty easy to get that information. Not so easy from the water. So that can become a challenge as well. So our recommendation is that on this particular amendment, I know you're holding a public hearing, but we think at this point you should not make a recommendation to the township board, because the township board has the ultimate authority over zoning, and so they have to approve it. The planning commission is just a recommending body. But we think at this point you should not take action on it, and that there should be some additional study and possibly consideration of maybe even amending this language further. And we would likely work with that, we'll work with staff, and we would come back with revised language and have another public hearing at some point in the future when that's ready. So that's our recommendation to you in this particular situation. So I will be happy to answer any questions before we turn it over to the public.
Well, I thank you very much for that presentation. We've been talking about this for quite a few months, and I think you boiled it down to at least where we're at this point.
Okay.
So, anybody else have any questions at this point?
Thank you for that.
Is it, wait a minute, is that based on that there could be a building that's within that zone that would be restricting area that would get averaged in and push everybody closer? Is that what you're thinking to look at?
I'm not sure I understand your question. What is your
If
question?
there's a cottage or something that was built closer to the water than it should have been, and so it's grandfathered in, right? Would that be averaged into the...
It would, and that's one of the challenges. In fact, there are instances within this township where you have some older cottages that may be up really close to the road, and then 2 doors down you have some that may be really close to the water. And you have this wide variation in setbacks. And so when you're trying to average for another home coming in that area, or maybe someone's tearing down a home and building a new one, all of a sudden if you average that, they might be like right in the middle, and it feels weird. It feels like they're not quite in a front yard, not in a rear yard, and there may not be a perfect solution to that, but I think we want to work with staff and study it some more and see what some other options might be.
Any other commissioners have questions at this point? All right, well, thank you very much, Fred, I appreciate it.
Sure.
If we can have the lights back on, we'll move on to the public, making their comments that they would like to make. Thank you. Okay. All right, anybody wishing to make a comment, if you would please come to the podium and state your name and address, that would be helpful. And then Whitey is going to be our time keeper, okay?
Madam Chairman, members of the panel, my name is Sam Idy and I represent approximately 50 residents along the St. John water side of the drive. I know last meeting you were handed a petition that basically was from those people, and I just wanted to make sure that we got that on for new business so that it actually gets addressed. And listening to what I just heard, I think most of it probably was just addressed, but I want to just make sure that it's out there and can be part of this discussion when we get final language.
We are all in receipt of what was presented to us last meeting,
Yes.
and that's where it stands at this point. We're still in, as he explained, gathering information, seeing what the public has to say.
That is fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else as a member of the public would like to come forward? Sure.
Mr. Del Wallerzak, 10371 St. John Drive. My question is, as he presented, that flowers, trees 8 feet trimmed, we want to know why arborvitaes are not included with that.
That's a separate ordinance. We are just at this point.
It's green, it grows.
Excuse me. I'll leave it at that. It's a separate ordinance. What we're addressing tonight is the setbacks only. It's a different ordinance, and if we need to address that, we are more than willing to do that also. But right now, we're just dealing with a public hearing that is dealing with the waterfront setbacks. Any other public? Anyone want to come to the podium? Go ahead. State your name and address, please.
Hello, Janice DeGregory, 7274 Park Lane Drive. So if I'm understanding correctly, I know we came in before, over the summertime, and asked for a variance to build like a sunroom off the back of our home, and they denied us in the hearing. So my reason for coming here tonight was, is it about the setbacks or just new construction coming into the neighborhood? Is it new construction, or us wanting to come back maybe after this hearing, or when people preclude their answers, can we come back or is anything going to be changed as far as the setbacks on building out on the back of our house? Am I making sense?
Go ahead. Maybe Rod's understand. Try one more time.
So I'm confused on
I think I
what's
understand
going
your
on.
question. Let me try to answer.
Sure.
The question is it going to impact expansions and not just new construction?
Correct.
And the answer is yes, if these setbacks impact all construction on a principal building. So in the event that something does change, whatever changes, it will impact the setbacks for new homes as well as expansions of existing homes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, I'll ask one more time. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to come forward on this topic?
I will.
Okay.
My name is Linda Murmas, 7990 Kingsway Drive. And I guess I have more of a comment than a question. Because we live on Anchorage Drive, we have a nice deep lot. We built 30 years ago. We kept in line with everybody else. Now we have new people coming in wanting to buy lots, and they plan on building right out to the lake, blocking our view. We've always gotten along. Our neighbors, because we've always done what everybody else has done, we've all gotten along. And I can see people coming in, building to the lake, and it's not going to be the same. We're not going to have that panoramic view. And I just think you should really consider our way of life, what we've had, and don't change it.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? All right, we did receive one written correspondence, so we're going to read that into the record, so we have that, and Christine is going to do that for us.
To Clay Township Planning Commission from Kathy McGrail, date February 11, 2018. It's my understanding that the Planning Commission has a public meeting on 2/14/18 and will be discussing removal of rear lot setbacks. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend and hope that you will consider my comments. Since this discussion is advertised for rear setbacks, this would not affect waterfront property. In the event I am misinformed, please consider the following, : properties abutting the river/water were considered waterfront property and nothing could be built/planted to impede the waterfront views. There is also a waterfront easement that cannot be blocked for pedestrian traffic. If this is a public hearing, shouldn't all waterfront owners be notified? I hope you would consider my concerns, and if this indeed a public hearing and/or ordinance amendment, you would postpone action until all affected owners have been notified. Please feel free to contact me via phone or text. Thank you for your consideration. M. Catherine McGrail, 6165 Point Trumbull Road, Clay Township, Michigan, 586-383-0378.
Thank you. All right, before I close the public hearing, I'll ask one more time if there's any more public comments. Hearing none, I will close this public hearing at 7:27. Thank you. All right, commissioners, you've heard what has been said by everybody, and we have some options at this point.
I agree, we should take a second look at it. Or third.
Jennifer, I said develop some better language that's more easily understood. And we've got to, again, review the, on paper, like you did up here once again.
Any other thoughts?
Make a motion.
Sounds like a good idea.
Make a motion to postpone the public, or the section 3.11 supplementary setback provision recommendations.
Support.
I'm just going to give Christine a moment to write this down. I give you time, Whitey. There's fair. Yes. Okay. All set? Everyone understand the motion? Okay, would you please take a roll?
Keith Bell.
Aye.
Edward Keller.
Aye.
Whitey Simon.
Aye.
Christine Holcomb, aye. Harold Bain, sorry, absent. Mark Borchardt.
Aye.
Tom Kozel.
Yes.
Robert Muesling.
Yes.
Kathy Schweikart.
Yes. All right, thank you everyone for that. We're going to move on to our second public hearing, which is the public hearing regarding zoning ordinance section 2.02 and 3.21 recreational animals. And I think Rod has a presentation also for us on this one.
Thank you, young man.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening once again. This one's a little bit shorter. Okay, so we are looking at some, once again, possible changes to your zoning ordinance. The first one deals with the definition section under section 2.02, recreation animals, and the ordinance currently reads, for the purposes of this ordinance, horses, mules, donkeys, goats, sheep, cattle, cows, swine, chickens, turkeys, or other similar domestic animals and fowl or animals used for a 4-H program. And then the new language is, or small-scale hobby, non-commercial purpose, shall be considered domesticated pets, recreation animals. So this is one change. Under your current ordinance, there was a limitation to some of these animals being associated with only a 4-H program. And there's a recognition that there are some folks that are looking to have the ability to also have some limited number of animals in a situation where it's more of a small-scale hobby situation, maybe having a few chickens or something like that. So this is trying to provide for that opportunity. So this is the existing zoning ordinance with the changes highlighted. So under recreation animals, you have specific ordinance provisions that apply to the keeping of recreation animals. Number one, this is all existing language. The parcel on which animals are located is not within a recorded plat, excluding assessor or supervisory plats. The minimum area for the keeping of domesticated pets or recreation animals, except as otherwise provided, shall be 2 acres if the subject property is a conforming lot of record. If the subject property is not a conforming lot of record, the minimum shall be 3 acres. 1 horse, mule, donkey, or cow, or 2 goats, sheep, hogs, or similar domestic animal raised and kept as a pet or for recreational purposes shall be permitted on the first 2 acres, 3 acres for non-conforming lots. Additional animals in the quantity described above shall be permitted for each additional acre of land up to 10 acres. This is all existing language. The minimum area for keeping of domesticated fowl, except as otherwise provided, shall be 2 acres. 25 chickens, 10 turkeys, geese, or similar domesticated fowl when raised, kept, or other than commercial breeding and/or commercial egg production shall be permitted on the first 2 acres. Additional animals in the quantity described above shall be permitted for each additional acre of land up to 10 acres. And then the new language makes it clear that if you happen to have less than 2 acres, you can keep up to 6 hens permitted on parcels that are less than 2 acres. Number D, this is a new paragraph. All recreation animals shall be kept within a fenced enclosure or other appropriate barrier sufficient to contain hobby animals on the premises. Such premises shall provide sufficient source for the animal's well-being and exercise needs. Premises shall include an appropriate shelter that can provide humane living quarters year-round. Premises shall not exceed more than 25% of the rear yard of the property. Another new paragraph. The premises, which include the fence enclosures and all other barrier and shelter for recreation animals, shall meet the setbacks and requirements of section 3.01, accessory building structures and uses. The next paragraph is existing language. The keeping of animals as described above shall further be subject to applicable local, state, and county health regulations. Manure piles shall be stored, removed, and/or applied in accordance with Michigan Department of Agriculture and County Health Department regulations. And then the last paragraph, which is new, is the operator is advised to be aware of the practice of conducting and citing animal operations in accordance with the Michigan General Accepted Agricultural and Management Practices, known as GAMPS, under PA 261 of 1999. The township is not incorporating GAMPS by reference in this ordinance. This is just to make people aware of those. So that's the existing language with the proposed changes that are included in that. I'll leave that one up. That is a summary of the proposed changes.
Thank you very much. Do any of the commissioners have any further questions at this point?
Not just a comment, this is another ordinance that we've been mulling over for the past several months. And I've made some inquiries on whether or not something like this would degrade any property values. Because now you have a tighter group of homes and you have animals. And our planners did go out and do a study of somewhat and indicate that it's not going to affect the property values. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? All right, if not, I'm going to open the public hearing and open the public hearing on this ordinance at 7:35. And if anybody has any comments they would like to make in regards to this, please come to the podium, state your name and address. I'll ask again. See no one raising their hand or coming forward. I assume there isn't. We did not receive any written communication in regards to this particular one, so we have nothing in that department. So I guess I'll close the meeting at 7:35. Public hearing. All right. Same as the last one, we have a couple different options. So actually, maybe we can turn on the lights again. Thank you. As Rod said, if you're looking to approve, we only recommend approval, and it goes to then our board for them to act. Or we can postpone, we can just, deny straight out. What's anybody's thoughts?
Madam Chairman, since
Yes.
the board has to act on our recommendation, I would move that we recommend to the board that they approve the changes to section 202 and 322 of ordinance number 126, County Township zoning ordinance, as presented at this public hearing.
Is it
Second.
320? Hold on a second, is it 322 or 320?
321.
You said 20.
I did, sorry.
That's okay, I just want to make sure we hit it right.
No, I need new glasses.
All right, let's do glasses.
Right.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
And we're going to give Christine a moment again to write this out, and then we'll do a vote. Section 202 and 3.2. Call for a vote.
Keith Fell,
Yes.
Edward Keller,
Aye.
Whitey Steinman,
Aye.
Christine Holcomb, aye. Mark Borchardt,
Yes.
Tom Kozel,
Yes.
Robert Muesling,
Yes.
Kathy Schweikart.
Yes. It will be sent on to the board then, okay? We're going to move on to item or letter C, which is a Crystal Inn reoccupancy discussion. This is a little different than we normally deal with. I believe in our packet you should have received a correspondence from Cindy is the first name. Oh, I'm sorry, Kate, excuse me. Kate. Rod, would you like to enlighten us on what's going on?
Just very briefly, this is an existing it's an existing structure, former restaurant, that the proponent would now like to reoccupy. And I think you have information that describes that it's going to be, it's more like a banquet hall, it's a rental hall. Basically you would have the opportunity to come in and rent out the facility for events. It could be any variety of events. It could be a wedding shower, it could be a party, a birthday party, it could be who knows what. But that would be open and available for rental through this process. And so the question is, and why this is before you, is the township staff felt it would be appropriate for you to have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant and to have them present what, in fact, they're proposing to do to make sure you're comfortable that the impacts are going to be similar to what a restaurant's impacts would be. And if you find that it really is a similar use, then it can just be approved through the building department purpose in terms of meeting occupancy requirements, and it doesn't require a site plan, it doesn't require formal action by the planning commission. If you feel that it does have impacts that are substantially different than a restaurant, then you would instruct the applicant what you want to see on a site plan, and then they would come in with a site plan and have to submit it and go through the process. So in many communities, banquet facilities and similar uses are considered to be very similar and are treated in a similar manner to restaurants. But in this case, you'll have an opportunity to make that conclusion on your own and ask questions that you think are appropriate.
Thank you.
Is there any licensing by the state of Michigan that would require?
No, well, it's my understanding, the only license that comes to mind is a liquor license, and they're not going to have one. They're going to require, if someone is going to rent it and they want to serve alcohol, they'll have to get their own temporary liquor license in order to do that on a temporary basis.
Is by chance Kate here? And that's the person who submitted. Okay. Well, she did submit, looks like 3 pages with a cover letter. She apparently isn't here tonight, which is fine. So I guess as far as asking questions, we could ask questions and
Do you have concerns?
they may have concerns, so.
How long is, so they recently acquired this property?
That is my understanding.
previous owners.
It was, because it was
And how
still,
long has it been vacant?
that I don't know.
So that'd be consideration for actually a site plan or for the building permit.
Not necessarily from a site plan standpoint unless it was abandoned, and I don't think it was, it's my understanding that they've been actively looking to do
Okay.
something with the property. I don't think it's been abandoned.
Yeah, I didn't get the impression it was abandoned. Talking with Sid and with Rod, it did not sound like it was abandoned, it's just they don't have a liquor license any longer because it was the bar. So this is a proposal that they wanted to hopefully go with.
Is there a terminology in any of the state statutes that would describe a place like this, other than, maybe a Lions Club or whatever? That those rules would fall under?
Banquet hall.
It's similar to a banquet hall, but
Banquet
I'm not aware of any specific state regulations other than typical regulations that would apply to a restaurant if food is served. And you may not have food served, you may or may not, may be catered in.
I guess a concern of mine would be parking. I'm familiar with the area, and there's not a lot of room there. And I can't remember the last time that establishment had 30 people in it, much less, that they're gonna be able to sustain parking for that many people as it sits right now. So I guess that's a concern that I would
Well,
have.
there is parking out back, but not that I've been. Anyways.
Yeah.
Well, apparently, according to this informational sheet, I'll call it, it's seating for 30 guests.
And she's got somewhere on here, something about a,
Parking for RVs.
Yeah,
and
like 2
supposedly-
paragraphs down from there,
Right.
that short one. Ample parking for RVs, trailers, boats, kayaks, cars, bikes, etc. Please say the layout for detail.
It would have been nice to have the site layout included in this.
Is it
I
something
tend
that
to
you
agree with you
provide?
that what we should really
Yeah.
have is an idea of the space of the facility that would be leased and figure on 30 or more people and then figure the parking area to see whether there's enough parking. I mean, that's the only question I would have, the parking.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe there's living quarters either attached to the structure or behind the structure as well. And what we-
Behind the structure's a house.
Yeah, and I believe that's part of the whole,
I don't know if it's the same owner any longer. At one point, my understanding was the same owner, but now that Barbara Kate is,
There's parking in the back.
I don't know if it's the same owner or not, because that was a question that did come up.
because I remember it was for sale, the house and the bar were for sale at the time.
What, Rod?
I'm sorry, just one observation related to the parking, particularly when I hear RVs and trailers. I think one of the things that would need to be clear is it your anticipation that if this was a restaurant, you would not have overnight parking of vehicles? So that might be a specification to consider, that, because otherwise, this could turn into something different. If all of a sudden you have the whole place fills up with RVs and they're trying to rent it out and have bathrooms inside, and then it's a totally different use. And I think I would caution moving in that direction. So that might be one of the stipulations that would be appropriate to consider.
I don't know if we've ever had a situation like this come up to us this way, and the person not being here to maybe answer questions, which is fine, it's okay. Any suggestions? And because we obviously have more questions.
I would postpone action and request that the applicant be here today.
That's what I was thinking.
So moved.
So moved, yes.
Yes.
All right, Christine, you're ready? We're gonna get Christine moment again.
Okay, the motion,
Whitey made the motion, yes.
and second.
Was, who seconded the motion, I'm sorry?
I did.
Oh.
Hang on.
Postpone action until,
Date uncertain.
Unspecified?
Receive more information from the owner.
I would,
Essentially, this motion requires that we contact the writer of that document.
And I think the contact should go through the building department,
Yes.
through
Yeah.
Cindy.
Sure, through Cindy.
So
Yes.
Yep.
I will just contact Cindy if that's okay tomorrow and say, would you please notify the applicant, Kate? We did have a discussion. We have a lot of questions we need answered. If they could please attend at their convenience, give us a date, which meeting they want to attend. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay?
Either that or he applies for the permit and then we review the site plan. So,
It's probably less costly to try
Absolutely.
this approach first, but they're more than welcome to do that too. But I think there's been discussion between the building department, the planner. It is an unusual situation, how to approach it, and to see if we could get more input. And
Absolutely.
we tried, but if we can do this route, it doesn't cost anybody really anything to get this information, and we'll see where we go. In the end, maybe we might need a site plan, we don't know yet. All set there?
Keith Fell,
Yes.
Edward Keller,
Aye.
Whitey Simon.
Aye.
Christine Holcomb, aye. Mark Borchardt,
Yes.
Tom Kozel,
Yes.
Robert Muesling,
Yes.
Kathy Schweikert.
Yes. All right, we're going to move on to item number 7, which would be the unfinished business, which we did the amendment to the agenda, and Rod is the star again on this one.
Steps in. Okay, as you know, you have set a public hearing for some potential map amendments to the zoning map for March 14th.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? Cindy placed in front of us tonight what he's going to be talking about, so if you didn't get a chance to review it, that's why. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and there's a series of potential changes that are going to be discussed with a public hearing on March 14th. In doing the final preparation and getting ready to get notices out, a couple things have come to our attention in discussions with staff. One of the parcels that's under consideration, which is 7624 South Channel. I believe that it had been shown on what had been discussed before as being potentially changed to R2, and really it should have been R1, because all the adjacent property there is R1 and there isn't R2 in the vicinity. So we would just like you to concur that that's appropriate, that we change that recommendation to be R1 on the notice that goes out. The second parcel is 5555 South Channel, and we have become aware that there is some litigation that is involving the township and the property owner that is currently being decided. And based on that, the recommendation is that that not be considered for a change in zoning at this time, and let's let those issues get resolved, and that could come back at a later time. So the recommendation there is that that not be advertised for a public hearing, and that we would revisit that at some point in the future. So we're just asking for your approval of making those changes in the notices that go out.
Any questions, anyone?
I would move that we concur with the recommendations of our planner to make sure that the change is R1 on 7624 South Channel, and not to include 5555 South Channel in the proposed public hearing.
I don't think we didn't write this out last time when we did it. We just did it.
Was it too long?
Based on the,
We just.
there was a slideshow with all of that, and you just,
Yeah.
Right.
right.
So we don't have to do like we were doing. No. We're going to continue on how we did it
Right.
at the last meeting with the
Yes.
other properties, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
So, Christine's happy with that.
I'm good.
Okay, any other discussion in regards to this? Or we're all set with Whitey's idea, and Rod can go ahead and get the language together. So we can get in the paper, and I think for a date we're scheduling, or trying to aim for is March 14th, is it?
Same one?
Today, yes, we like the 14th.
No, it's because there's 28 days in March.
I know. All right, thank you. Item number 8 is the planning consultant's report. You might as well stay up there.
Stay there.
Hurrah.
That was a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. What is coming to be more like a quarterly newsletter? As you may be aware, we periodically have a newsletter. It's most recently been more of a quarterly newsletter. So I just thought I'd give you an update of a couple of things. This is actually, the front is actually a part 2 of an article that we've been presenting on what makes a great street. And the previous version talked a little bit about what makes streets congested. And this article talks about what makes great streets. And so we go and provide an overview of some of the key components. And one of the things that we talk about is that streets are really more than just a way to get from point A to point B. They become, as urban designer Alan Jacobs describes them, great streets are those that make community. They're desirable places to be, places to spend time, to live, to play, to work, and they can markedly contribute to what a community can be. And so a lot of communities are spending a lot of time looking at streets as places where you have bicycle activities, you have pedestrians, you have places to sit, places to congregate, places to be part of the community, not just moving cars going as fast as they possibly can. And in order to make that happen and to make streets more desirable for people, one of the keys is slowing down the traffic. And we know there's some very strong statistics that suggest that if you're a pedestrian and you're hit by a car that's going 40 miles per hour or faster, you have a very low probability of surviving, whereas if that car is going 25 miles per hour, you have a much higher probability of surviving. So there's a public safety reason for trying to keep traffic as slow as possible, particularly in areas where there's pedestrians that are congregating. One of the things that helps to create a great street too is mixing land uses. And you have some of that going on in the township where you have your mixed use districts where you're getting a combination of residential and commercial together, and you have an opportunity then to potentially create a little bit more of a pedestrian environment. Planning streets to be complete streets, designed so that you think about the pedestrian. So when you're making a road improvement, maybe you make a pedestrian path improvement at the same time, so that you can think about all the users of a right-of-way, not just the motorist. And then thinking about streets as placemaking. As once again, as Alan Jacobs has observed, trees, while not necessarily required, they can do more than anything else to provide the biggest bang for the buck if you do them right. Great streets are where pedestrians and drivers get along. Street trees provide shade and shelter from wind, rain, and snow, and they soften and beautify the hard edges of the built environment. It's a pretty low-cost investment compared to a lot of the investments we make on roadways to add street trees close to where pedestrians are to help to shade that experience if you're walking, for example, along a sidewalk. And also providing for benches, waste receptacles, and other elements, low-level lighting that helps to create that type of experience. And then we also provided a couple of other updates. One is on a recent court case, which is a court case that went before the Michigan Court of Appeals that deals with the Medical Marijuana Act of 2008, York versus Miller. And it's a pretty interesting case. As you're aware, if an individual has a cart, they can grow marijuana. And in this particular township, they were permitting them as that operation as a home occupation. And the township zoning ordinance says that if you're a home occupation, the activity has to take place completely inside of a building. A lot of home occupation ordinances are written that way. Well, the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act specifically states that the growing of marijuana can take place indoors or outdoors, as long as it's contained and locked. And so what this case tells you and what the court decided. They upheld the trial court's ruling that the township zoning ordinance was in fact in conflict with the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, essentially saying that the state legislation trumps local zoning. So if it's a home occupation and you're treating it that way, you can't contain, in the case of medical marijuana, you can't contain it inside. It can be either inside or outside because the state law allows that. So an interesting case, I thought we would bring that to your attention. It does say, though, that primary caregivers are not exempt from other building and construction regulations. So it doesn't mean you can't regulate, it just means that if the state law says you're allowed to do something explicitly, your zoning ordinance can't flip that around and say, no, you can't do it. State law always trumps local. And then just a couple of other brief updates from some of our other communities. We're working on comprehensive plans in the city of Brighton and the city of Rochester Hills, as well as DeWitt Township near Lansing. And then from a zoning standpoint, I think some of you may be aware we have a user-friendly zoning product called Clear Zoning that makes zoning ordinances a lot easier to use. Shelby Township just adopted, or actually this month, the Planning Commission held a public hearing. Township Board will be acting on adopting their Clear Zoning ordinance. Grand Blanc Township just adopted 2 new zoning districts that we worked with them on for a technology village area, a very exciting area along I-75 where they're trying to bring a mix of technology businesses as well as residential and a village area into one large vacant land area. And then probably our client that's the farthest away, Steamboat Springs, Colorado, just adopted in January its new zoning code with our Clear Zoning format. So that's our update. Any questions?
No, thank you. Sounds like you've been busy.
We have, which is good.
Well, maybe this new push on infrastructure will help us get some of those road jobs even where we could use it.
That would be great. We need, our infrastructure could use some help.
Yep.
Moving on to item number 9, which is the ZBA representatives report.
Nothing to report. There was again no meeting, no appeals.
Thank you. Item number 10, board representatives report.
Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Chairperson's report, that's me. In our packets and probably via email, Cindy Babish has sent to us, again, the workshop that's scheduled for March 29th at the County Building in Port Huron, but there's also 2 other educational things that we could attend. If anybody's interested, please let Cindy know as soon as possible. If you have any questions, I'm sure we'll be able to answer them.
March 29th, right?
March 29th is the one in Port Huron. It's their annual workshop. I think quite a few of us have attended. I think it's important. I think so far Mark's going. Carol's going.
I would like to know. When you can swear.
The one on March 29th, I gave notified somebody that.
Good. Okay.
I think I would.
We'll just let Cindy know and the township will pay for it, okay? I think that's the only thing I really have on my part. So item number 12 is Planning Commission members' comments.
I would like to express my thankfulness for your wonderful presentations today. I believe it was very helpful, especially for the public hearings.
Thank you.
I would second that.
Thank you.
Most definitely. All right, item number 13 are public comments. Anybody in the public wish to make any comments on other matters that we have not discussed so far tonight? If so, please come to the podium. Hearing none, I'm going to move on to item number 14, which is adjournment.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.